Alright, so welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, we're trying to explore how to augment LLM in a standardized way. So what is MCP? So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, which is a unified standard, right, to allow us to be able to do LLM to tool or LLM to resource connection. What do you mean by that? So initially, we had LLMs, and then all the LLMs that we have were trained on old data, so they don't have access to current information, right? So they were limited in its context. They were limited to its information access. So how do we face this issue? So the solution was to increase the context window of the model, either by training a bigger model with recent data or by using retrieval augmented generation or graph augmented generation. There are many, right? Or ontology augmented generation. So all of these things, right? So either it is RAG, graph, or ontology, right? So any of these things, right? These were ways that we created to be able to allow us to be able to increase the context that the model has access to, right? To increase the tools that the model has access to. By doing so, we explore some untapped capabilities of the LLM, right? So that is what we did. And by doing so, we also have the option of like doing tool calling and all of these things. All of these things are ways we have generated to augment an LLM, to empower and enhance a model to be able to do a lot of things, right? But there is no standard. So Anthropic decided to create a unified standard so that we can have the means of enhancing and augmenting our LLM so that we can increase the context or the access to tools, resources, and the standard API that the model can have access to. This is similar to just an adapter pattern. So it's in short, MCP, Model Context Protocol. The model is the model, the context is the tools, resources, and standard APIs that we have, and the protocol is a standard that allows us to connect our models to different tools, resources, and a standard API. Just like you have an adapter, right? So we have laptops, phones, electrical devices. The only way we can connect our electrical devices to the electrical grid is a simplified interface like an adapter on your wall, right? So that is the same way behind MCP. So the model, context, and the protocol is just like an adapter pattern or a design pattern or a framework that standardize or provide a contract to allow us to connect our LLM to tools and resources. Perfect. So how do we work with it? So what are the components of an MCP, right? Not MCP protocol. I've been seeing people saying MCP protocol, but just MCP, right? So what are the components? So the main component is that we have a client and then we have a server. Just like you have the internet. So in case you want to access the internet, let's say I want to access Google, I need a browser, right? So the browser here is my client, which allows me to be able to access Google, which is Google has their own server. The same way we have a client, and a client is just anything that allows us to be able to access another tool. So the client in this case can be any tool that is having an LLM behind it. It's a wrapper around an LLM that must connect this LLM to different tools. And then with the MCP server, we have a standardized way in which we can write our own code that access our tools, our resources, and our prompt or an standard API. And then anybody in the world that is having a client can allow his model to be able to connect to our server. Just like if I have a browser, I can connect to any website. The same way if you have your client, or your client can be cloud desktop, it can be Cursor, Vscode, your IDE, or any other application, you can connect to that server via that MCP protocol or MC protocol, right? That is the main idea. So the protocol is just a contract, just an agreed upon standard that allows us to be able to connect our LLMs to different tools, right, via a server, just to manage the context, right? So too much of the token, so let's see this in practice. So I'll go back again to my workspace here, and then let's see how to do that in Python. So I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to install it. So to install, just go with pip install MCP, right? And then let's go with the CLI, and I want to also install test blob to do some stuff, and then HTTPS, right? So I've installed them all, and now let's make a directory. I'm going to call it as MCP tutorial. I'll move into MCP tutorial, and as you can see, there's nothing here. So I'm going to create my server. So server.py. Then let's open this server.py and start writing some code. So this is my server.py, right? We are trying to create our server, which will have access to tools, resources, and prompt. And by having this structure, any client that follows the MCP protocol can be able to access these things. So let's see. I'll go back again, and let's go back from here. Goes from MCP import. This is what we installed already. So we're just going to create a simple basic MCP server that we can use on our device, right? So that's the main idea. So it's similar. The idea is like you're creating a server, so similar to Flask or any of them. So MCP. So from MCP.server import, we have the fast MCP. We want to import my fast MCP. Then let's go back here and initialize. I'm going to create a server, and here we give it a particular name. So MCP, it can be any option, any variable. Then I'll call it as my fast MCP. Then I'll give it a name. So let's go to a simple MCP. Perfect. That is it. So let's run this. This is our simple stuff. Then just as we will do our if main, if underscore name is equal to, we need to just go to underscore main, as we always do. Then we can run it. So there is MCP, just like Flask MCP. Then we have the server, right? So we have SSC app, we have run SSC, async, run SSC, all of these things, but you just go with the run, right? And then this allows us to be able to run it and use it, right? Perfect. Now let's see the main component. So as we said, our MCP consists of the main component are the tools. These are the things that we can augment our LLMs with. We have resources, and then we have prompts, right? Of course, there are a lot of things, but these are the main components, right? So we have the tools, the resources, and then a prompt. So let's start with the tool. So to just create a simple tool, I'll just create my simple tool. Let's do something practical. I'll come back here and go with from test blob, import test blob, and I'm going to create a simple function, which I'm going to call as get sentiment, which is going to take in a text, which is string, and then we are going to create my sentiment, which will take my test blob, which takes in the text, then sentiment, right? And then we can return the polarity, so sentiment.polarity. So this is a simple function, right? And then we can expose this particular function to our LLM so that our LLM can be able to use it, right? So it can be anything. So to do that, we just create a simple endpoint or tool, which I'll call it as sentiment analysis, something like this, API. And then this will take in my test, which is a string, and then it's going to return, let's return a string. We can return it a float if you want. Then here I'll just pass in my function, so get sentiment, and pass in the test here. To be able to allow to recognize this, to allow our server or anybody outside to recognize all these tools, we need to decorate it. So I'll decorate it with my MCP. Then we have .tool, and this is a simple way to decorate it, right? So this way we have decorated it, right? And now it can be accessed from outside. So let's go back again and let's run it. So how do you use it? So there's two ways we can access our server, right? So you can use a client or any of the clients. So it can be a cloud desktop app, can be Cursor, Vscode, Terminal, or any app. But there is also another way you can access your client to see if it's working using the inspector, which is another tool. So we call it as my MCP Inspector. So with the inspector, in case you are working in development, you can use this MCP Inspector to like act as a debugger, right? Or to analyze what you are doing. So let's work with it. So I'll just go back again, same location I have. I'm going to run my MCP dev, then my server. So it's going to ask you a question that do you want to install it, and if you have it already, you have not installed it, press yes to install. So it has already been installed. I'll just open this one. Inside, this is the place that the MCP Inspector is listening on. I'll pass it here, and then now we have it here. So we have, let's explore the interface. So this is MCP Inspector version 10. So in case you're watching from the future, this may have changed. Now, how do we work with it? So first, you can click on this to connect. You can change the interface to light team in case you want, or let's say system team, as you wish. Then in case I want to connect to it, I will just go back here and click on connect, and this is going to connect to my server that is running, which is this one here, right? It's going to connect to that server here. And now, how do we know that it's connected? You can see that just showing here connected here. And then let's see, we have resources, prompts, tools, and then some more, right? So in case I want to see all the tools that are available, that are exposed, if I click on the list tools here, you see that we have my sentiment analysis tool. If I click on this, we have the option here, which is exactly the same component that we have here. So we had the sentiment analysis API, then the test. In case you want to give it some description, as you can see, there is no description. You can just give it a dot string here. I can just say sentiment analysis of test, right? Analysis of test. So if I save it and then let's restart it. If I go back here, let's connect. And now if I go back to the tools, I click on list, you can see that we have the test here. So this test here is the description we had here, right? And then this is the function we are calling. And then I can just pass in, click on this one too. Then I can put in something. So I love working with AI and then code, something like this. If I click on this, you see that we got the sentiment analysis here, right? So this is one way you can use to access your server in case you are developing, to be able to debug and then work around it, right? Perfect. Then if I go down here, you can see that we have my list here, history, and you can see the list that some information about the request, what is happening, so that you can know what is happening. Or you can also see the logs that are coming from here, right? You can clear off the logs. Perfect. So that is one way. Now let's see how to work with the prompt or the resources. So in case I want to add a resource to it, I can just go back again. Let's add another tool. Let's create another simple tool here. I'm going to create a simple tool. So this simple tool, what this tool is, that we can just create a simple tool that access another endpoint. So let's call it as let's say access. I want to create access job board API. So this is another tool we are creating, and this tool is going to just fetch job board. So fetch job listing. So that's what you're trying to do. And then we can now use request to do that. So let's import request, or you can use HTTPS. So let's use request. Then here I can just create my simple response, which is going to be my request.get. Then I'll pass in my API, right? So I can just pass in a simple API, so HTTP or any other API that I have, right? I can just pass it here. So if I have an endpoint that I want to access, so let's say www.arbeit now. Arbeit is Deutsch for German for work. Then let's say API, or it can be any API. So job board API, something like this, or it can be a news API, or it can be any of them. Then if responses the status is equal to, let's say, it's not equal to 200, right? Then we can return failed, right? And let's give the status code here, something like this, right? Failed to fetch job. And then we can now, if it's successful, we can return it. So let's return the job response.json. So this is a simple tool we have created. So we have created two tools. This is just a normal tool that does a function calling, but it is another tool that does a call to an external API, which is what we saw here, right? So we have normal tool or another tool that does a call to an external API. So if I go back and then let's restart. If I clear, let's list the tools. So we have my sentiment analysis API here, and then we have the Access job board API here. Perfect, right? And I can just click on it. So let's change it here. We do not have any string. We're not passing any string. So let's clear, start. You can just go without restarting, but I always prefer to clear it. Now you see that if I run it, now it's giving us this error, right? So invalid API because I spelled it wrong. So I have to make it double. And then this is supposed to be 1, right? So let's clear off this again. And let's list the tools. So it cannot because I have to restart. This is just for debugging purpose, right? So if I list the tools, now I have it here. And I said now it was able to access it and then give us the result, right? Which is very cool. And this is what will be sent to your model. So by this option here, we can have a means of increasing the context window and increasing the context that the model has access to, right? And the model will now have access to this. Perfect. That is one of the ways. Now let's see how to work with the resources. So I'll go back again to the resources. To work with the resources, you can just simply create a simple resource. Creating a resource is very simple. All you have to do is that you just have to pass in some text. So it's going to be my MCP.resource, right? That is the description you give to it. You can just give the description a name. So let's call that profile. Then we want to get the username of the person. So let's go as the username. And then we can just go with my def. So get profile, something like that. And then I'll pass in the username of the person. It's a string. And this is going to return, let's say, some data somewhere. It can return, it can be an API call, it can be database call or something. So let's say get profile of user, let's say from DB, something like that, right? And then I can just return. So let's say this is going to return something. So the user. So info about whatever user, right? So this is a simple resource. Now, if I go back here and then I go to my resources here, if I click on this here, we cannot see it, but if I refresh, connect, and I go to the, not the list resource, if I go with list resource, you cannot see anything, right? But in case you want to see it, you can just go to the list template. Now you see my template here, right? And you can see the name here. I can just type in something. So let's say Jesse. And then if I click on this, read resource, now we have some information being returned, right, to info about Jesse. So that is how to augment your LLM using the main idea behind MCP, right? So we have tools, we have seen resources. You can also do the same thing for prompt, and then we have seen how to do with an external API. But and we have seen how to use the MCP Inspector, right, as a client, just for help you debug. But how do you do the same thing for Claude or any of these MCP host or MCP client? So let's see an example. In case you have Cloud Desktop, you can simply go with the install it on your system. There's support for Macintosh and Windows, and then it comes and then you can just add it to it. But since we are on Linux, we want to be trying to see how to do the same thing for Vscode. I'll go back again to my Vscode here. And then inside my VS Code, I'll go to my toggle chat for my GitHub Copilot, and if I expand it, as you can see from here, we have my GitHub Copilot already open, and then we need to use the agent mode to allow us to be able to have access to our content. So if I click on add context here, you can see that we have prompts, right, and then other tools here. But if we want our VS Code to be able to access our MCP server, we can simply go back again to the Ask, switch on Ask here. I hope it's big enough for everybody to see. Yeah, this is better. And let me hide this one here so that I can see it. If I click on the asset here, I can just go to the agent mode. If I click on the agent mode, this is a new this is part of the new version of Vscode. Then I can click on the select tools. If I go to select tools, add MCP server. If I click on this, it's going to give us two options. So either we have the command or HTTP. This command or HTTP is the same thing that if you go back to the inspector here, we have this transport layer. So we have STIO, standard input output, and then the server sent events, right? So these are the two transport type. That's exactly the same thing you're also seeing here. So I go back here, we have add MCP, we have the command, and this is useful in case you want to run a local command that implement the MCP protocol, which is we are going to use. Or you can just go with this option here, and in this option you have to pass in the URL right to that particular server. So let's go back again and let's try this one. So if I click on this one here, I can now pass in the command to run. So what is this command? So this command is exactly the same command I ran here. So remember that we ran in the beginning, we run this command at the beginning, right? So there are so many times we run it here. So MCP dev server, right? My server is this, so that's what I want to run. So I'm just going to open another tab here and get the current working directory, which is this place here. So I want to, if I wanted to run it, I would have done it like this: python server.py, right? So this is my server, right? And I want to run this command, so I can just get the current directory, which we have on top here. So I'll copy this. This is the path to my file, to this particular file. I'll go back to my here, then I will just pass it here, right? So I'll pass in .py, right? So this is the command I want to run here, right? And not this is supposed to be /server.py. So this is the command I will want to run, right? So I can just go with my Python, and if I click on the enter, then that's created one. And then if I click on enter again, we can save it to all your workspace or just for this current workspace, right? So let's go with my workspace settings here. Now you see that we have it here. This is the current workspace, not the entire stuff. Now, in case I want to run it, so the command is Python, and then this is the path to my server that I want to run, right? If I save it and I come down here, now you can see that the icon has changed. If I click on new available tools, it's going to discover the tools and say we have two tools. We have my sentiment analysis API and my access job board. So these are the two tools which we created here. The same tool, so 2.1 to 2.2, and then the same thing that we saw here when we went to the tools, right? These two tools. That is what our client, which is GitHub Copilot, have access to. If I click on this one here, you can see we have it here. You can select the one you want to use. That's one way, right? Perfect. So these are our tools, and now it's available to our model. So in case you are chatting with GitHub Copilot or an LLM model, you can just say, let's say, use tools, or use whatever tool, sentiment analysis API to get the sentiment of the following text, right? So it's going to use this tool because it's to identify this tool from here and then run it with it, right? So that is one way. You can also go back to the add context here, because as we said, the name is MCP Model Context Protocol. So all these tools and resources are just to improve and enhance the model's context, what the model memory. So it's like, it's not just like the context, simply can also be like the memory, right? Or let's say awareness of the model, something like that, right? Or the info space, right? Information access space, right? So whatever the model has access to, that's the basic idea. So if I go back here and I click on the add context, you can see that my tools are there. So we have the sentiment analysis API and then my access job board API there. So these are all still part of the context, right? And then we can now add it, and you can see that it has been added to it, and I can ask my model to do something. I don't have it sign in, but that is the main way to go. So that is how to work with MCP, right? You have seen how to build a simple MCP server in Python. So the main idea is that you can just import the package, right? Create your server, then you create your functions, then you decorate it here with the MCP tool, or in case the resource, MCP resource. And in case you also want to have a prompt, you can also do the same thing. So all you have to do is just pass in something. So let's say dev. So let's call it as I say dev agent prompt, something like that. Then you can just pass in your prompt here. So yeah, you can just pass in something. Then you can just pass in your system, whatever, right? Whatever your prompt that you have there. So you are whatever. So you are a dev agent equipped blah blah blah, right? Or whatever prompt that you want, right? You can also do the same thing. Then you can decorate it. So if I go back to MCP here, select the examples of how to use it here. So if I go to the Python SDK and then I go down, we have this is tool, and then there's the option to also, this is resources, tools, and then this is how the prompt are, right? So you can just give it something like this. So let's copy this one here, then I'll just copy this, right? So please review this code, right? Something like that. Or we can just say something, yeah, some test, which is a string. Then we pass the a dev agent giving the following command. Yeah, giving the following, dev agent to perform the following tasks. Then right, you just pass in your test here, or we can call it as tax. I cannot spell tax. Yeah. Perfect. So by this option here, you see that this is how to do that. So we have seen the resource option, we have seen the prompt option here, and now if I go back to my chat here, I can go back here. We have it here. We cannot see it. We can stop it and then start again. It will not change anything. So add more tools, same place that we have it there. Then you can enter the stuff. If I go back here and I refresh from here to my prompt, we cannot see the prompt yet, but if I refresh it, so let's refresh, connect. Then if I go to my prompt, so we have my two prompts here. We have my dev agent prompt with some tests I can ask there. So code review. Then I can go with this, and then we get the role and then some information, right? You're blah blah blah, right? You're a dev agent, perform the following task. The same thing with the code review, right? Perfect. If I clear it off, and then if I go to the tools, you see all the various tools there, the resources. I can list the resources that I have available, and then these same things are also available to my contest here, right? So you see that we have the job board, the prompts. You can also create reservable prompt, or you can click on this. So that is something that I want to share with you with MCP. I hope you have learned something. Thank you for watching the tutorial. See you another time. Stay blessed. Bye.